Hey everybody, Bill Sieglein with CISO Executive Network. I'm here with Jamey Cummings. He's with JM Search. Jamey took the opportunity to come and speak at our national symposium this year in July on sort of the career guidance kinds of things for our members. It was a great session. Members spoke very highly of that. And Jamey and I talk periodically about how the industry's going. And I thought we would just chat for a few minutes about things we're seeing and just say, have you seen any of that? And what are you seeing as trends in hiring, salaries, and things like that? So, I mean, I think I mentioned this before, Jamey, is over the last, I'd say 18 to 24 months, we've seen entire CISO roles eliminated by a company or downgraded to a much lesser role where they'll let the person go and then maybe 6 months later rehire somebody at a much lower cost, less experience, and less importance within the company. And I will say that trend has been happening in non-regulated industries, retail, right, and things like that, manufacturing. Definitely not happening in the banks and hospitals. That
Mm.
won't happen because of regulators. But it is a trend that's bothering Andy Land and I. We're seeing enough of it. And then those members sometimes are out for 18 and 24 months looking for their next gig. They're being selective for sure, not just taking anything. And typically in between, they do the virtual CISO thing, right? They'll do a little consulting, keep their hands in the game. And I think that's important. But I think you haven't necessarily seen that trend, but you've seen other interesting trends. So what have you seen?
What I personally have seen is I've not, nor has my team really seen or heard of specific instances where the role is just outright eliminated. But I have heard anecdotally of organizations diminishing the role or breaking it into pieces or perhaps putting it in another lower level within the organization and having it be maybe a little bit more of your traditional just VP or head of information security, not your broader enterprise CISO focused on enterprise risk management with respect to security.
Mhm.
And I'm speculating here, but my sense is that there's a little bit of calculation going on by companies as they're trying to manage their expenses, and
Mhm.
they're looking at what is the worst case downside if we were to have an incident. We can recover, pay the fines, and then they look at other companies who have been able to survive those incidents and then get back on track. I think that maybe they're just speculating that, well, let's just take our chances on that and let's not build these big expensive teams with a really expensive CISO. I think we can get by with just more check in the box.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that I've not heard of that happening in your really highly regulated industries. I'm not hearing about that in financial services in
Right.
particular. And it's certainly not either with, maybe they're not as regulated, but my my experience and what I've heard is that technology companies, especially those who have any technology products, they, even though they may not be regulated, well, they really, really want to be mindful of making sure that uh, maybe they're drinking their own champagne, if you will, that if
Hmm.
they're not secure in their own products, well, then they could lose trust with their customers. But
Right.
across other industries, whether it's consumer products or retail or manufacturing or otherwise, I think that maybe the calculation is that the downside is not significant enough that they can get by with a diminished role. So
Yeah, and I think
it's a little
anecdotally we're
speculation,
sensing
but
the
I think
same
it's
thing.
probably directionally
Right.
accurate.
I think you're accurate on that. I think you have hit the nail on the head is the companies have done the math and like, wow, here's a person who comes into my office on a weekly basis and tells me bad news. Wants to spend, frankly, wants to spend gobs of money to buy new security products and build out a program and hire third-party vendors to do things. And it doesn't go away. It actually sort of increases in spend. It hasn't gone away. And I don't know that I'm getting a direct ROI for it. I don't know that it helps me sell anything. In some cases, it does. Hey, we got a SOC 2 certification that helped me win a customer, or we got
Yeah.
ISO certified, helped me win a customer. And those are the companies that keep the CISO. I think the ones that are eliminating are the ones doing the math, saying, "I'll take the fine, I'll take the dip in, our stock, but we'll come back, right? And it is what it is. I'll put somebody in that role just so they're there, but I can't afford this expensive people anymore. So again, I haven't validated that, and I don't think you have either, but it is certainly an interesting thing. So
Yeah.
maybe that now something I'm encouraging members, and I'd like to get your opinion on this. I'm telling our CISOs is become less dispensable. Meaning, when something comes up and it's in IT, take it. Hey, listen, we need somebody to also run IT help desk. Oh, me, I'll take it. Right? I'm the CISO. I'll take help desk or infrastructure. I tell the infrastructure people to patch all day long. They yell at me. I'll take it over. Right? I'll become sort of a deputy CIO in that way. And
Yeah.
that way, they're wider and deeper in the company, less disposable. When the cuts come around, they go, "Oh, you know what? They're involved in five things. I really can't cut them. They're not just the person who brings me bad news." Good advice? Have you seen that at all, or am I making it up?
No, I've seen that. Well, you are starting to see more and more CISOs who are inclined to do that become CIOs.
Right.
And there are some CISOs who have told me when I've asked them about their own career progression, what might they consider when I say, hey, some of your peer group are becoming CIOs. There's some who just say, yeah, that's not really what I want to do. I just love security. So there are maybe some purists who love the
Mhm.
mission. But to the extent a CISO does have that interest in expand the responsibilities, I think absolutely you should take those opportunities to expand your responsibilities. We have seen instances both with large enterprises and smaller companies where infrastructure and security have been placed under one person.
Yeah.
Uh, and what's interesting to me too is this is my hypothesis, one of the reasons that CISOs might become increasingly more likely to get the nod is that, from my experience, the key differentiators often are not your technical prowess or your specific expertise. It's what we refer to these soft skills, the executive communications, executive presence, business acumen, risk management, stakeholder management, and then briefing the board. So if you think
Yeah.
about, not still over half of CISOs report to CIOs. Of the direct reports to the CIO, which one's going to be the one who's going to be briefing the board?
Right.
It's the CISO. So it's almost an unfair advantage for them to get to leapfrog in that sort of experience that will continue to help differentiate them. And CIOs need to come up different routes. Well, why not the CISO route? And so to come back to your original question, especially if you want to make yourself, if you're career oriented and want to do more things, then yes. If you just want to be a CISO and you want less headache, then maybe you don't take on that responsibility.
Right. Yeah. So we're encouraging members to do that. Another thing that's come up is this concept of resiliency, company resiliency, which is
Mm-hmm.
all sort of a big issue, of course, when CrowdStrike had its hiccup and everybody thought, oh my Lord, we were down, right? We lost money. And of course, not just a cybersecurity product, any product. AWS goes down for a day. I'm getting indications today that there are some outages here on the East Coast, that several large systems have been down. We don't know if it's network related or if it's AWS but I've been looking at the down detector software to try to figure out 230 plus sites receiving reports. So resiliency, keeping the company up and running as we're so heavily dependent on infrastructure, cloud, SaaS, and many other systems. I'm telling our members, use resiliency. Get it into your language, get it into your lexicon, make it part of your job description, maybe even work it into your title, because we think that's going to make you stickier to the company, more valuable to the company. Talk about disaster recovery, business continuity, right? Overall system availability, company availability. So, thoughts about that?
Well, I think resiliency is a really interesting word and a very appropriate one, because if you think about the information security officer role, it still has that security in the title, but
Hmm.
all the things you just talked about are actually, by definition, more than security. It
Okay.
is resiliency,
Yep.
disaster recovery, business continuity.
Yeah.
And even if CISOs don't have that direct responsibility, what they are relied upon to contribute to the planning for recovery and resiliency.
Hmm.
And yeah, who knows, 5 to 10 years from now, whatever time frame, maybe we have a chief resiliency officer. You
That's what
have
I'm thinking.
in particular, if you think about this, I've seen this mostly in technology companies for some time now, like the last, let's call it 10 years or so, the chief trust officer, because
Right.
that combines security and privacy.
And product security and privacy,
Yes,
correct?
absolutely. So I think that that's one where trust is probably a more all-encompassing representation of what that executive is supposed to do. In other industries, I could see where that could even become a title, chief resiliency officer. Yeah,
Yep.
maybe not, doesn't roll off the tongue, but I do think it's an
Doesn't, but I,
appropriate term.
yeah. So I have a friend, actually, he was a Naval Academy guy, who, two-star, and he was appointed the chief resiliency officer of a large bank in the Northeast.
Hmm.
He was there for a short while and then got called back to duty at the National Security Agency for a little while. So he had to give up that role. But he was there for maybe a year in this role, and it was about resiliency. And the company scratched its head. It was a little ahead of its game, and they weren't quite sure what to do with it. Does security roll up to it? Does risk roll up to it? Does project management roll up to it? They couldn't quite figure it out. It was before its time. But I think we'll see more of it. And
I think it makes sense. I
right.
wouldn't be
And if you
surprised.
think, right, the three pillars that we've always talked about is confidentiality, integrity, availability. We've spent the last 30 years worrying about the confidentiality, protecting the data. We've done very little to protect the integrity of the data. What if it's changed just a little bit in an AI model? Whoops, can't trust it anymore. And then, of course, the availability of systems, which, so I think those three things together are speaking to resiliency. Well, I'm glad you're seeing that as well. Are there other trends you want to share with our members before we end our time? I mean, are there things that advice to our members who are either looking to hire or are looking to get hired? What does the market look like now for that one tier below the CISO? Because I get members asking me, a matter of fact, someone
Yeah,
came to me today, I need a deputy CISO.
I'll try to address both of those and wrap them all into
Okay.
one response to my observations. The first one is that there is cyclicality in general to CISO hiring, as you might expect, and there's a point right now where people have been sitting tight for longer due to a host of reasons. I think one of them is that they want to stay in their roles long enough to accomplish what they were brought on board to do, to the extent they have the support they thought they were going to get when they joined the organization.
Mhm.
Um, my experience of doing search for over 17 years now is that election years in general tend to throw sand in the gears of executive movement.
Mhm.
Organizations themselves and then individuals, unless there's some really compelling reason or some burning platform, the tendency is to sit tight and wait and see until the dust settles and they have a little less uncertainty about what might be happening in the next year. So that's happening. The other thing that I think is happening too is that this would get to your question around the number twos. Uh, Over the last 12 to 18 months, more frequently than in the past, when I've talked to a CISO who is in transition and they've left to go take on another role, or maybe they decided to go sit on boards or do something completely different. Uh, I put on my business development hat and say, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing to backfill you?" And I'm finding more number twos getting promoted than in the past.
Interesting.
So that's, on the one hand, I think that's great.
Right.
We need to develop that next generation of talent, but for the sitting CISOs, that's one less opportunity that might be out there if that's what they want to do again.
Right.
Also, there are less greenfield opportunities than there were 10 years ago. There are more organizations have gotten religion, if you will, and they have
Hmm.
programs, and uh, so there may be a little less need for someone to come in and build a new program. There's a little bit more, hey, let's continue to take this from good to great, which I
Right.
think better facilitates the number twos getting the role. I would also say that I would give organizations and the CISOs credit for being more serious about developing the next generation of talent.
Hmm.
And the other thing is that over time, as there's more and more movement of executives from one company to another, that's where you have more of a step change as opposed to an incremental increase in compensation. Well, at some point in time, that's got to level out, and companies are going to do the calculus and say, well, if I need to pay a premium for someone else to come in here and I've got a number two who we think could do the job and continue what we've got going, well, then why would I do that?
Yeah.
So those are some factors I believe that are working against CISOs who are looking for the next role.
Yeah.
All that said, I do believe that based upon my past experience, we're likely to see a fair amount of pent up demand for executive talent in general. I mean,
Mhm.
agnostic of whether it's CISO, CIO, or otherwise.
Right.
The executive search industry has been, it's been a little flat recently, but I think the cyclicality is reaching the point where we're going to start to see a little bit of pent up demand that will be released.
Mhm.
I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic. I'm not going to say bullish that
Yeah.
we'll start to see a little bit more churn. It's that, if what happens is if people sit tight, there's fewer dominoes falling. But once the dominoes start falling,
Yep.
I think we'll see a little bit more activity in the market. That's
Yeah.
my,
I think
my
you're going to see,
hypothesis.
you'll see an entire generation of CISOs retire, I think, over the next 2 to 3 years, right? I know in our network, I mean, I have members who are my age who have been with me since the beginning when we started this thing, and they're all like, hey, I'm out in 2 years. I'm done. I'm looking for my replacement.
Yeah, I tell you, Bill, it is over the last several years become even more of a high stress, burnout job.
Mm,
If you look at instances now where more and more, understandably, CISOs are expecting D&O insurance because they don't want to be left holding the bag if something goes wrong and they're the fall guy or gal.
right.
And I think there are some who just say, hey, I don't want to go rinse and repeat. Not only are there not as many like new greenfield opportunities, or there can always be a turnaround, I suppose. But also, I think they're saying if they don't become a CIO, they're inclined to go do something completely different. Whether it's start up a security company, go do, put up their own shingle or join a smaller firm where they can do advisory work or fractional work for smaller, medium-sized companies. Or they'll go. Not many are doing this, but some will go either be advisors or investors at a venture firm that's focused on cybersecurity companies. And you have a few adventurous souls who go out and actually start up a company. But I think there's some of them who say, I have to do something different because just doing this all again is just not really, I just don't want to do it again.
Yeah, I'm seeing some of that too, the burnout. I'm just done with it. It's an interesting sector that we decided to get involved in, isn't it? I love it. I mean, I'm
It
passionate
is.
about it, but I've built my career around it. Well,
Well, I
Jamie,
love that.
yeah.
One thing I like is the mission orientation of this. And, there is a sense of the CISOs tend to really be inclined to cooperate with each other because
Mm,
they're all in the good fight, fighting the good fight together.
right.
And so I do like that aspect of it, and I think that's my sense is that's one, and it's exciting. A little bit of the I don't want to say thrill of
Hmm.
the hunt, but how do you
Right.
outmaneuver your adversaries, and it keeps you on your toes. And some people just love they're energized by that sort of
Yeah.
environment.
I think it's what drew me to the industry many, many years ago. So, well, listen, it's always great to catch up with you, and I hope we'll see you again at our national symposium in July next year. We'll chat about that separately, but thanks for your insights today. Again, Jamey Cummings at JM Search is a great partner with us, helps members find their next gig, and also helps members find that second person that they need to bring in, head of their SOC or the person who's going to run some portion of their security program. So, Jamie, thanks again for your insights. Be well.
Thanks, Bill. You too. I appreciate it.